Hi guys, Avery here. Today, this is part 3 of basics of an engine. So smash like video, make sure you like, subscribe. Anyway, okay, so I'll be doing the carburetor, which is how variable jet carburetors work. So it's like a simpler carburetor. So this is variable jet dash SU type, so SU type. So the SU is the simplest type of variable jet carburetor. The other main type, the Stromberg, has a rubber diaphragm instead of a piston. So that's that. Okay, so I'm going to name the parts and then I'll show you guys so you know kind of what to look for. So there's the piston chamber, piston, throttle, which is when you push your accelerator, it opens, main jet, so that's where it gets its name, jet needle, choke, adjustment to jet, fuel pipe to jet, float chamber, float needle, feed pipe, fuel feed pipe to stub. Yeah. Okay, so there. So you can always pause it. So the throttle is when you push your accelerator on any type of carburetor, the throttle would open, which is what lets your air and fuel go by. So that's when your throttle is like slightly open. So this being the throttle. So you can see there, then the gas comes from there. And then when you're fully open, slash butterfly valve, which is also the part of the throttle, so you can see there. And you can pause it if you want. So, and then there's the choke linkage, which is the pin. So the choke linkage is right there at the end, and then it goes here, then the pin is right there. Operating the choke lowers the jet, which allows more fuel to be drawn in. And that's it for that. And then so it's high vacuum at full throttle. The throttle butterfly is fully open, so like the butterfly valve. And then low vacuum in the piston chamber, so that's like the low opened that I showed before. And that's pretty much it. So it's kind of like a normal carburetor, it's just a little more carburetor-y. Okay, so next I'll be back. Okay guys, so this is the fuel system. So I'm gonna later on explain how the float needle valve works. But right now we're back on the jet carburetor and explaining. So I'm gonna name the parts and then show you guys them. So there's the choke flap, float chamber, accelerator pump, throttle linkage, which is actually what your gas pedal line links onto. At least if it's a mechanical pedal, like a string anyway. automatic choke assembly, and then there's a little wire attachment, which is cold start electric preheat. So, fitted to some recent carburetors. So now, you can see. So there. Okay, so the carburetor is what mixes the gas and air, by the way. That's why it's called a air fuel mixture. It's mixed. Okay, so this is what it says in little area. So the engine idling with the throttle closed, a small amount of mixture, so like the air fuel mixture, passes through the caps on each side of the throttle flap or butterfly. So you can see there, closed, and the fuel comes from the float chamber, goes up, go down, and then out, and then it comes in with the air, which is what makes the mixture. And for the float valve, okay, so there's a float there that you just saw right there, and then there's the float needle valve, which is there. So how this works is when it's low, the needle, so there's like, the float is here, and then the needle is like here. So when the float is down, the needle opens, it lets fuel in to fill the tank, I guess. It's like a float tank. And then when it's full enough, the needle will go up, and then closing the axis to the fuel. And then when it gets low enough, it'll just come back in, and then it kind of keeps doing that. So then slowly running jet. So then when it's slow, it doesn't have much pressure, so it goes down. But when it's up, so the engine is running fast at wide throttle, the butterfly is almost vertical, allowing free passage of the mixture. So you can see now, it's wide open, going through, and now that has more pressure, instead of going down, it goes up, and then goes further in, and then down, so more fuel. That's how that works, because the more fuel, the more engine speed. And then during sudden acceleration, the accelerator pump comes into action and slips a richer mixture. So you can see, it's like that. So the fuel goes in there, and it's more richer. So then it can get more fuel, and it'll start faster. And that's pretty much it for that. So I'll see you in a second. Okay guys, so this is the ignition system. So I'm gonna read the little piece here. The coil is the component that produces this high voltage. It is an electronic device that converts the low tension, so LT, current from the battery to high tension, so high HT, high tension, current each time the distributor contact breaker points open. Okay, so I'm gonna name the parts and then I'll show you, and there's actually little words under the names. Okay, so the battery is a source of electronic power when the engine is stationary. It also supplies the power from the generator, so the generator is like the alternator, when it is not turning fast enough to produce 12 volts. Ignition switch, so your ignition, the key. Okay, ignition switch. The ignition switch is usually mounted on the steering column or dashboard. So older cars would have that on the dashboard. And controls between the battery and ignition system. Rotor arm, which is the spinny thing in the distributor, which like spins, it carries power through it and sends it flying through the wires. Okay, plug lead, so like the wires I was just talking about that go to the spark plugs. Okay, and then it goes to a plug cap on terminal, which is the thing that turns volts into very high voltages. And then spark plug, the HT current from the distributor passes down the terminal core of the spark plug, then produces a spark as it jumps the gap to the side electronic. This ignites the fuel air mixture in the cylinder. The contact breaker points, so it's like in the distributor cam, which is also in the distributor. That's part of the rotor arm. Drive, which is actually what drives the distributor, like what makes it spin. The distributor is usually driven direct from the camshaft and is geared to turn a half engine speed. Okay, then LT lead, HT lead. The LT is actually smaller and HT is bigger because it's more voltage. And then the last thing, coil, and that is what he's reading. The coil consists of a metal casing containing two sets of insolid wire windings on a soft iron material core. The collapse of the magnetic fields generated around the primary windings produces the HT current in the secondary winding, which goes through the distributor to the spark plugs. So now I show you like that. There's a lot of parts on there. Okay, so there's also the complete ignition system. So the battery goes to a switch, which goes to the coil, and then it kind of spins in there, and then the LT turns in, it goes over there, turns into IT, or LT, and then condenser, distributor, electroid, rotator arm. So you can see there. And that's the ignition system. see how engine timing works. That's our next one. So I'll be back. Okay, so we're doing the timing, engine timing. So this is for the distributor. Okay, so I'm going to name the parts and then I'll show them. So cam lubes, which is like in the middle. Base plate, which is like on the bottom. It's a base, obviously. Base plate. Vacuum chamber, which is a vacuum chamber. There's like air in there and it gets vacuumed. Weights, and then distributor shaft. So let's see there. So the distributor both sends the HT current to the current spark plug and ensures that it arrives at the best time for maximum efficiency. Okay, how the configurable weights work. Okay, so this is actually kind of like a motorcycle clutch. So the there's, I'll show you, and then I can explain it in a second. So you can read the little things by pausing the video. Okay, so when it spins slow, okay, there's a shaft, and then there's two, they're called shoes. I don't know why, but they are. So they can go out or in, but they're springed in. But when it's spinning slow, it stays in. But when it's spinning fast, because fast and everything goes out when it's going fast, the shoes spring out against the wall of whatever is attached to the wall, and it all spins. So I'm gonna read it here. The slow configurable weights are in by the springs at a low engine speed. Fast, the configurable rates, I don't know what this is, weights move outward against the spring tension, activating the ignition. So yeah, and then over here, so you can see there. So in this electric system, steel ridges on a rotor create a small voltage. So when it's idling, as they pass through the magnetic field of the trigger head. And then the second picture, magnetic strips embedded in the rotor created the voltage in the system. Each time they are opposite the trigger head, which triggers a transistor. Yeah. And then that's pretty much it for the engine timing. I'll be back. Okay, so we're going to be doing the steering system, which is the last thing. Also, I'm going to link a car quiz in the description if you want to draw that after this video, because you probably know half of the stuff about cars now. If you watch the first and second video in this. Okay, so steering system. So I'm going to name the parts and then I'll show you. So steering column, which is the plastic part in a car where the key is. Universal joint. Rack housing. So then there's like tie rod and stuff. Oops. Using this hand. So that right there is actually the tie rod. Should be at least. No, that's the sway bar. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna read the little thing. I think that's a sway bar, but okay. A typical rack and pinion steering layout shows how the rack acts directly on the road wheel steering arms. Okay. So this is what's inside your steering gearbox. So there's the steering column, the pinion, which is the gear, and then the rack, which is on the bottom. So like your shaft, and then turns this, and then that makes this go back and forth because logic goes like that. The pinion is closely meshed with the rack, so there is no backlash in these gears. This gives very persist steering. Persist steering. The steering gearbox system. Okay, so there's the steering gearbox, drop arm, idler arm. So you can see right there. And then a worm and peg steering. The worm moves the drop arm by means of a peg connected to the fork. Okay. So instead of the other, turn this, it goes like that. It's like there's a twisty thing, and then this goes like that, so I can like do that. I'll show you. So like that. And a recirculating ball steering. The thread between the worm and nut is filled with balls. So, yeah. So you can see there. And that's pretty much the end. So I'm gonna link that car quiz in the description. So smash the like, make sure the bells ring, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.